Welcome back to the Expect Chaos podcast. My name is Matt.
And I'm Molly.
And this week we were supposed to have a guest. I know we spent a good deal of the last episode hyping that up a little bit. However, our guest had an unexpected obligation come up, so we're going to have her next week. So you're stuck with us for this episode at least. So we're happy to have you.
Thanks for coming back. And if this is your first episode, Expect Chaos podcast. Expect Chaos as in we told you we were going to have a guest, and psych, it's us.
There you go. True to form. So yeah, the Expect Chaos podcast. I can't even say it. That's amazing.
It is Monday.
We're leaving it in.
It's Monday for us.
Yep.
You all are hearing this on Tuesday.
On Tuesday.
Likely.
We record on Mondays, so that doesn't always bode well for the flow of the show or the ability to even pronounce the name of the podcast. But it's we're doing our best. We're doing our best here. But
I think everyone's doing their best after the last week. It's been a lot.
It's been definitely a long week. So yeah, the Expect Chaos podcast. So if for those of you joining us for the first time, Expect Chaos podcast. Welcome to the Melee. So this podcast, we explore a variety of issues and ideas and topics related to building resiliency and developing a better sense of how to navigate life's challenges, your career challenges, work challenges, leadership challenges. And the reason that we call it Expect Chaos, which is not something, again, if you're joining us for the first time, you would expect a podcast of this type to name itself, is we both have ADHD, as we talked about in the previous episode. See episode 2, I think. No, episode 1, and then we renamed the podcast 48 hours later for episode 2. And so anyway, that's a long way of saying I'm getting sidetracked in my brain. So there you go. There's that chaos.
We do have a lot of tangents on tangents.
We speak in footnotes. I certainly do anyway. But that's a long way of saying that this podcast, we're attempting to connect what feel like disparate ideas, things that might be a little bit out of the box or kind of get weird with it, and connect those dots in a way that's helpful for our listeners as we move through this journey of, again, trying to help folks get a better sense of, again, how to navigate life. For us, kind of talking through some ideas in that department as well. So that is, in a nutshell, the Expect Chaos podcast. So
awesome. So today it's still the beginning of January, and obviously there's always a lot of fervor around resolutions and things like that. And as we talked about in our first episode around expectations and having to necessarily abide by kind of fake cultural stuff, we're not necessarily the biggest resolution fans. However, we do think it's helpful to approach life with intention. So maybe this feels like a distinction without a difference, but instead of New Year's resolutions, in reflecting on 2025 and trying to think about some of the lessons that we learned, the experiences we had, and how that can inform us heading into 2026, really kept coming back to this lesson around simplicity and almost the way that we clutter and kind of create, maybe through that clutter, chaos in our own lives, which often didn't leave us space to do the things that we actually felt we needed to do or wanted to do. And so stepping into this year, really trying to think about ways that we can approach things from maybe an easier is best or more simple is best. We've all heard, especially, people love their acronyms in their business, but the KISS, like keep it simple, stupid. We don't necessarily want to be mean to ourselves in this process, but really thinking again about an intention for the year. Where are we unnecessarily cluttering or not leaving space for the things that we actually want to do?
Yeah. And what got me thinking about this was we had this coffee maker. So this is going to sound like kind of an odd segue here, but we had this coffee maker. It made great coffee. It connected to Wi-Fi, had all the bells and whistles.
It even had a name.
It had a name.
His name was Aiden. Maybe it was Aiden and making us coffee, supposedly, but I got to make the bad pun today. That's usually your domain. Expect Chaos. I've entered a bad pun into the conversation. But his name was Aiden, Aiden.
Great coffee maker, great company.
Yeah, we're not hating on it. For us, we maybe got the one bad Aiden in the bunch.
You know what? It may not have even been bad. I think it just stopped. It stopped working, and so
we did download all the things.
We did.
We flushed the water lines.
Now, in fairness, did not reach out to support. Perhaps as
I did reach out to
vigorous.
support.
Oh, did you?
Yes, I did.
Yeah, I did not follow up.
I followed the rules. Like I followed as a.
Did everything right.
I did.
So we made our best efforts at fixing the issue with this coffee maker. And again, it made great coffee. But the thing for me, again, having ADHD,
this is basically the anti-sponsor. This is the way to go about not getting sponsors.
Like
name and crap on products.
Yeah, we are not going to. We're not sponsoring these people.
In fairness, too, this is a quick tangent and an aside, and possibly a defense of this brand. You had purchased this coffee maker a while ago.
A long time ago.
We finally were able to use it. So we were past the warranty period. So perhaps there was some operator error on our part. But regardless, we had a coffee maker that allegedly did all the stuff. And when it worked, it was magical. However,
it had an app, had Wi-Fi. The thing, though, for me at least, is for someone who has ADHD, any amount of friction in these sort of like mundane, everyday, repetitive tasks it feels like I'm scaling Everest, honestly, sometimes. And it's hard to explain to people who don't have this particular wiring in their brain. So having all of those apps and the hard resets and the firmware updates and all of those things with this coffee maker, line flushing, descaling, like all of it. And I it's for all of you coffee people out there, and I would consider myself, both of us are a little bit on the coffee snob train. I mean, certainly not as extreme as you can get, though. I've seen some stuff. So before anyone gets in the comments and starts talking about, well, you really do need to descale and flush.
We did that.
We do our best. We really do our best. However, for me, that friction is just enough to be like, I hate this experience and I no longer want to have it in my life. So that is a long way of saying that really what we needed our coffee maker to do is make coffee.
Just make coffee.
Just make a good cup of coffee.
We don't need an app for it.
It doesn't need to, spring on at 5:30 in the morning. And by the way, that's not the typical wake up time anyway, but we don't need it to pop on at 5:30 in the morning and have the smell of freshly brewed coffee wafting through the house, like in the cartoons where the, smell of like the pie wander. Yeah. So anyway, we don't need that. We just needed something to make coffee. And I think it was a good sort of metaphor for life in general is, sometimes you just need the thing to do the one thing that it needs to do, as opposed to all of the other stuff that it does. Now, and again, in fairness, there are different settings and things that probably, enhanced the experience. Just for me, I think that was an area of life that was way overly complicated. I didn't need this like Rube Goldberg machine to create. And again, no offense to the good people over at Aiden. If they want to reach out, happy to entertain a conversation about that.
That was the name of the actual coffee maker. The entity is a different company, but
people will be able to figure it out. If Aiden themselves wants to reach out.
All Aidens in the world, we are not attempting to disparage you with our frustration in the coffee maker. Falls short for
computer Aiden wants to reach out and have a conversation. Look, I mean, but at the end of the day, like I bought it. I thought it was cool when I first bought it, but realistically, I am not the target market for that because it's just way too much friction. I just want to grind the beans, throw it in the basket, put the water in, flip the switch, and then it makes coffee, and that works out for me. That's what I needed. I think a lot of us then in life try to find our Aidens, and it seems cool. And it seems like a thing that's going to solve a lot of problems. It was
when it
cool.
worked.
It was poor Aiden. It was cool. But realistically, from a long-term life sustainability perspective, it became more of a burden than it did a bringing joy or bringing any sense of value. And again,
coffee does bring us joy. So anything that goes between the joy of our cup of coffee and just
can't have it.
Hard pass.
Yeah, hard pass. So that is to me sort of a metaphor for simplifying things, and I think that's something that we see across life, right? So another little anecdote. So I am attempting to sell a house right now, and we're up there emptying out all of the contents of the house. And I've done this before for anyone who has ever had to move. There is that moment as you're moving where you look at all of this stuff. You've cleared out all of the nooks and the crannies and the closets and the storage and the attics and the, wherever you can stash stuff, the sheds in the backyard. You clear out all of that. And then you're looking at a pile of boxes and items and things like that. And you wonder, where the hell did this all come from?
And when's the last time I actually engaged with the contents of said box or bin?
Yeah. Like I have not thought about this thing.
Yeah,
in the past 5 years of my life.
I was going to say, like, in terms of years, not just, I haven't used it in a month or two. But the question and the realization that it may have been years, that it was just hiding away, without any, and not in like an object permanence ADHD way, but in a, my life felt complete without that thing.
And then you look at it and you have to put it in a box. You have to tape up that box. You have to pick up that box. You have to move it somewhere. And that sucks. Like, it is the absolute worst. So I think it's just been like a lesson after lesson in simplicity, where it's like, I think we load our lives up with all these gadgets and things and widgets and whatever it is. I mean, I am probably one of the worst offenders in that category. And I, you know, just looking through all of this stuff, I'm like, what is this? Like, when did I get this thing? Why did I get this thing? Why is it now causing me more pain than it ever brought me joy? What is this stuff? So I think like moving actually has a really interesting way too of clarifying priorities.
Yeah, clarifying needs versus wants.
Yeah. And like, it's fine to want stuff. I think that's the interesting thing about it, but it's to the point where those things that, you know, you want in a moment or think that you want in a moment, like a heavily computerized coffee maker, and then it eventually becomes just a point of friction in life, and then you can't focus on other stuff. So as we're futzing around with manuals and support and apps and
flushing the line, descaling for the 4th time in like a week, it's like, this isn't
reprogramming.
Exactly. It's like, this isn't it. This isn't it. No. This is not how I want to spend my life. And I think that that's part of it too, to your point about, it's not bad about wanting things, but it's trying to put on the scale, okay, I want this thing now. What comes at its expense? Whether that's money, whether that's time. Is this thing actually serving the life I want to create, the bigger picture life beyond just the discomfort of the moment or the dopamine hit that comes with opening that box, or whatever pleasure, joy, sense of meaning perhaps that thing is giving? Is that just a sort of momentary sugar high, or is it actually in service of who you are, who you want to be, where you want to go? And not everything has to obviously have that kind of like existential weight to it. Like we like joy and frivolity and whimsy as much as the next podcast host. However, we have, as you start to become aware of things that we talked in last week's episode about meditation and mindfulness and kind of the awareness, but as you become aware of patterns, you then start to see them show up and realize that so much of life is spent servicing the things and the complexity and the stuff versus actually living and doing the things that we want to do. Like we talked about, you know, another one of our intentions for 2026 is to go on a hike each week, to go out and reset. If we're fighting with the coffee maker and having to clean and reorganize all the stuff that we don't use, but you got to dust it and clean it anyway, does that actually leave time and space for the thing that we want to do, that we intend to do, that we have said is going to actually enhance our lives in ways beyond that activity in a nutshell or in a vacuum?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, even the act of hiking itself, I think, could become overcomplicated. So this weekend, we ended up having a lot going on around the house, you know, sleepover stuff and just like cleaning and whatever stuff needed to happen.
Slight foot injury for someone in the household.
Slight foot injury, and just getting work done and other things that are pretty essential, right? The things that needed to happen. If we were so attached to this idea that the hike had to be some kind of extravagant experience where we had to go find a brand new place with this like beautiful vista, and the only way that hike was going to be enjoyable and count toward our goal of going on a hike is this beautiful Instagrammable view of things, or
a certain distance. Like it's not a hike unless it's over a mile.
Yeah.
Whatever distance you want to give it.
So if we did that, then we would not have had time to go on a hike. And what we ended up doing was we went to a place, the state park, Lums Pond. Again, shout out Denrec for the amazing state parks that we enjoy frequently. But, you know, right around the corner, and, you know, because of said foot injury, distance was not a possibility this time around. However, we got out in nature. We walked a little bit. We, hung around a beautiful lake and got to see some water. So, I mean, it really, like, again, it was 10 minutes up the road. And had we gotten into this, well, let's complicate it. You know, we have to find a different place every time, or it has to be a certain way. then we wouldn't actually be accomplishing the thing that we set out to accomplish or set out to do or intend to do, which is make space to get out in nature and go for a walk.
Yeah.
Every
and
week.
Create a reset where we have this moment of stepping outside of the routine, the work, homework, all the stuff, to just get out in nature, feel connected to something bigger than our own seemingly important, but albeit tiny experiences in the world, to just have that moment before we then go into another week. Sort of like almost a threshold moment of saying goodbye to the week that was and feeling refreshed and maybe a little more grounded and centered as we step into the week that is to come.
Yeah. So it was a simple thing, and it worked out quite well, which brings me to think then beyond sort of everyday life, but what we see show up in work frequently. And I think I've seen this with a lot of clients. I think we've both seen this collectively with a lot of clients sometimes, but there are these big complex challenges. Sometimes they are complex, right? There are a lot of moving parts, a lot of difficult pieces that you have to figure out how they go together. And then because the problem ends up being complex, there's this impulse to make the solution equally as complex. So then you add a whole bunch of steps between here and there. So, again, for those of you joining us for the first time, and we've introduced ourselves in varying ways over the last couple of episodes.
Expect chaos in how we introduce ourselves.
I know it's a little bit different every time. So it's a nice variety, but you get a different piece of the story, I think, every time we
It's true.
every time we do an episode, which I love. But so I've been running a strategic communications firm for the past 14 years and have worked with in politics, doing communications in politics for campaigns from the local level all the way on up to Congress and beyond. And so, you were essentially trying to take complex issues and distill it down into something that's quite simple. But we found that, at least I found, like when I first started the firm right around 2012 or 2011 is when I started, and then 2012 was the first Obama reelect. And for those of you who were paying really, really close attention in 2008 and in 2012, and even before that with Howard Dean to some extent, like there was this whole idea of
way back,
but talking about like getting super sophisticated with the targeting of different communications. And so we started
the beginning of micro-targeting trends,
the micro-targeting, and it worked. I think generally it worked pretty well at that time, given the context, right? Because essentially, for those of you who aren't involved in politics or communication, so what we're talking about is the ability to target certain groups with very specific, highly personalized messaging on issues that you care about. So, for example, I don't know if you're trying to like target suburban dads who drive pickup trucks and like to play golf and watch football on the weekends, and they care about a very specific issue. Then you develop these targeting models and models of persuasion models, essentially, where you try to figure out what they think about things and then target them with very specific messaging. That was sort of what that was, right? So you're taking these very tiny slices of the electorate, and then you're building these highly customized messages for them. And then that accelerated in 2008 with the advent of social media campaigning. Social media like MySpace and Friendster and things like that.
MySpace.
Throwback. Whatever happened to Tom?
Go. I don't know.
I wonder.
I feel like there was something recently where someone was like, "Where's Tom?" And
I hope he's doing well.
I hope so too.
Yeah, I loved MySpace actually.
I did too. I always liked picking the song that went with your profile. That was always like, oh man.
I know, that was fun. And a lot of bands too were really into that gave a lot of bands their start in a platform for their music. I actually am somewhat embarrassed. Don't go looking for this. It's not on the internet anymore, but I was in a band in high school, couple. I will speak for myself. I wasn't very good, but we had a MySpace page, and that was a big thing. We're like, everybody check out the MySpace, whatever. So
nice.
It was cool. Yeah, that and Pure Volume for the other music nerds out there who were kicking around the scene at that time.
Sweet.
Yeah, very sweet. Rock out, everyone.
Still micro-targeting.
So
Tangent.
Yeah, we're back. Expect chaos. So that's when social media was starting to become a thing, and you really did have a greater capacity to actually target those people with messages. So like Facebook started to become a thing, and then 2012 Twitter, Facebook was already a thing, and then Twitter started to become a thing in the social media constellation. Prior to that, it was like direct mail for the most part. Otherwise, you were stuck with broadcast TV, which was the opposite of micro targeting. But I think then you still start to build layers and layers and layers of complexity on top of solutions like that. So then fast forward another 5 years down the line, and you have all these crazy different, kinds of strategies that sound very sophisticated for targeting people, when in reality, like normal messaging, right? Like just coming up with a compelling story overall is really the basis of being successful in these campaigns. And I'll give a good example of this. This is something actually, I was fortunate enough to teach a class on social media at Centenary University in New Jersey, which is small.
Should we be calling you Professor Hayden?
I never had any of the kids call me that.
What?
I hated it. First name
Did
only.
you?
It was so weird.
That's so funny.
People would say professor and I'd be like, ugh.
Own it. Celebrate it.
Well, I mean, it's technically, because I do not have a doctorate, you are not supposed to be called professor.
Really? What are you supposed to be called?
Mr. whatever your last name is. You can call me anything. Just don't call me Langford.
Oh, no. Yeah, this is the bad joke episode.
Sorry, everyone. This is what happens when...
this is what happens on Mondays when we're supposed to have a guest and they didn't come.
Oh, man.
Jokes.
Here it is. So...
You're teaching a class.
Yes,
they did not call you professor.
They called me Matt for the most part. But, there was...
You're cool.
I was the cool guy.
Young, social media.
That was it. Yeah. You nailed it.
I did.
That was it. That was the entire story.
That was exactly how you sounded, too.
What's up, guys?
What's up? I'm like young and fun.
Hello, fellow kids.
Hello, fellow children. What's going on?
It's so funny. Yeah, that's exactly how it went down.
It's almost like I was there. Anyway, you were teaching. I'm sorry. I'd keep building the tangents.
So I was teaching a course on social media, and I had the opportunity to do that for several successive semesters. But right after the 2016 election, when all of the controversy around Cambridge Analytica started to bubble to the surface, we had the opportunity to talk about that as a part of a conversation around ethics and social media. And I promise not to go down that whole tangent. Maybe that's another episode we explore. But point being is that for those of you who have either mercifully put it out of your mind or hadn't really dug into it, essentially Cambridge Analytica was this company that said, and I'm high level summary here, they could target people based on their psychological profiles, right? So for example, if they gathered all this data through psychological assessments, that they were able to get access to data through Facebook and different apps and quizzes and things that people were, and again, I'm oversimplifying, but were able to take, and then they were able to essentially combine that data with the voter file and figure out who you were as a person, right? So the thesis was that, like, for example, if they've found you to be conscientious and like some other combination, or neurotic or something, that you would respond to specific types of messaging.
Who, me? Only slightly neurotic. Depends on the topic.
Okay, I don't find that to be the case, but
that's good.
That's good. We're doing great today.
Yep.
So essentially, they're able to take all of this information and then to target people based on psychographic profiles. And the interesting thing is, like, there is actually no good literature that bears that out. Scientific literature that shows that psychographic profiles are particularly predictive of political behavior. Aside from, there are very specific instances where you look at, for example, personality traits that are most likely present in people who tend to subscribe to conspiracy theories, for example. Like, there are different psychological traits that play into things like that. But however, like, overall political messaging, like, there wasn't a lot of good evidence that worked. So really what that was doing is just creating this layer of complexity where you have all of these different things. The really egregious issue there was more the data privacy thing. I mean, like, nobody would be, or very few people, if they were aware of it, would be comfortable with an outside company having access to details essentially about your psychographic profile. And even those are flawed, right? Like, I think those assessments are not, ironclad in how they put us each into boxes. But anyway, point being is they layered all of this complexity onto micro-targeting. So it's like, oh, we can target people based on their consumer interests. The reality of the situation is, for non-political people, is party ID just happens to be one of the most predictive variables in how you vote. So if you identify as a Republican, there's a very good likelihood that you will vote Republican. And same thing for Democrats. And there's a little bit of swing in between, but it's really not that much. And if you look at the last, couple of elections, again, not to go too far down the political rabbit hole, but just to demonstrate the point, you're talking about 70,000 votes nationwide that actually make a difference, right? One way or the other. So they've been really tightly bounded in the variability for how people swing. And it just creates this super complex issue when in reality, now I would argue the simple solution would be, okay, what are the narratives and stories that will be most broadly compelling, because the system and the problem is so complex that the solution really cannot match that complexity. So you almost need to go back to those basics. And I think a lot of times when we're in a situation sitting with a client, either in a political context or communications context, a leadership context, or in a boardroom context, you sit there, and I think the impulse is to meet complexity with complexity, when in reality, simplicity is quite effective sometimes. Sometimes it's a very simple answer. It's not elegant, it's not flashy, it's not glamorous. We just have to fight that urge to stop chasing the shiny object sometimes. I mean, that's my view on the situation, but we find that that's a huge issue.
But we just have access to so much information. And the challenge is, to your point, like, because there's complexity and there is discomfort in not knowing, and the avalanche of information available to us gives us the sense that this can be solved by more data, more information, that we can get to this level of certainty if we just gather and amass enough information, as opposed to what exactly are we trying to do? What story are we trying to tell? How are we trying to move people? And just the way that our brains are wired from an evolutionary perspective, we do not hold on to data. Our brains are just not primed to hold on to data. What they are primed to hold on to are stories and narratives. And we will not remember the laundry list of factoids and graphs and everything else, but we'll remember a compelling story, especially if we can see ourselves in that story. Our brain is just, again, wired to grab and hold that information and be able to more easily recall it. But that's just, again, the times that we live in, is this more is more is more. And there can absolutely be a case, especially for entities that have fiduciary duties. For when I was in the cabinet, I had to go present my budget to the legislature. Yes, I had to have a narrative around it and an explanation, but I also had to be prepared to answer very detailed questions about what grants or how much money. So we're not saying that you can dismiss data and not have data be part of how you arrived there. But to the extent that you are trying to motivate and move people and get people to make decisions, throwing and overwhelming them with data is not the move, because they're going to be put in a state of, frankly, just, again, overwhelm. And a sense of, well, oh my gosh, this is more than I thought it was. I need more time. I need to really look at this myself. I need to come to my own conclusions. You've presented me with information I wasn't expecting. There is a thing as too much data, and decision fatigue is real. There's a lot of things that, again, from a brain, neurological perspective, like, we are just not great at making decisions on the fly after somebody has dumped essentially an avalanche of information on us.
I mean, and some of that may not even be relevant, right?
So
some of that
information,
problem. Right? So then you end up with, and it's so funny because I think, again, when we think about how we work and some of the issues that we've been brought in to work on, the assumption is it's a communications problem. And the reality in a lot of those situations is, yes, partially a communications problem, also a complexity/decision paralysis problem. So the issue is that it's whatever organization, group, team, leaders having a hard time getting to a decision directly impacts the communications piece. And that decision paralysis is often, again, born from a flood of data and information and inputs. And again, crafting these very complex solutions to problems that can probably be solved fairly simply. And simple doesn't mean easy either. And I think that's part of the issue that we run into as well, is when people think about complex in a weird way, it almost feels easier. And I'm not sure what that is, but it feels easier to people.
Well, it's like, I always think about this. I remember at some point, like in high school, I was forced to, we had to write a paper, and then they said, okay, we'll now distill it down. It was like the assignment was like, write like a 5 to 7 page paper. Okay, now you have to make it 3 pages or less.
It's so hard.
It's so hard. It is so much harder to try to convey themes and ideas and decisions in a succinct way, not an overly simplistic, patronizing way that minimizes the heft of the decision you're making. But it is so much easier to just throw words at things versus have precision in the words you're using.
Exactly. So, I mean, simplicity, again, doesn't mean easy. And we see it too, like with, again, bringing back to another political example, and people are like, why am I not raising enough money for my campaign? And usually our first question is, I mean, historically has been, we don't do any of this anymore, but did you sit down and do what we call call time, where you sit down and call donors for money? And the answer is, well, I did like an hour here, an hour there. It's just not working. And like, no. You have to lock yourself in a room for 6 hours a day and call through everybody that you know, and then do it again and do it again. And then you're going to find another list and you're going to call through those people. And that's a very simple solution, rather than hearing, oh, we're going to go and create this video and do like a fundraising push and we're going to go viral and come up. And that is a viable strategy eventually at some point.
Yeah. Or there's some magical email that we can send that people from all over the country will just jump out of their seats and hit that button to donate online.
It's so funny because that, I think, was one of the little hangovers that we had from the Obama years, was everybody was talking about the optimized email fundraising, and it did work really well. But the reason it worked, or at least had an opportunity to work, I'll put it that way, the reason that it had an opportunity to work was because Barack Obama had a profile, was exciting to people, right? So that was already there to some extent. I mean, not at the very, very, very beginning, but later on. So when you're trying to apply that lesson to a candidate that nobody has heard from, especially for Congress, like the House, right? So prior to midterm elections were relatively sleepy affairs, albeit bloodbaths for the party that was in the White House typically. But it's just like people weren't paying attention. So they weren't paying attention to the election. They weren't paying attention to the candidates. I mean, if you walked out in the street and asked a random person, like, who is your member of Congress? Most people couldn't tell you. And that's probably still the case to some extent. But trying to apply that email, like we're going to have this super complex, sophisticated email targeting and A, B, C, D, E, F, G testing system in place to optimize our email program only works when you already have a base to work with. And that sounds very attractive and sounds very easy, and but in the complexity sounds great, right? It's like, oh, we have this sophisticated thing, and there is always room for that
proprietary system.
Look, and like we will do those things ourselves. The issue is, have you exhausted all the simple solutions first? And so going back to the call time thing, like, did you call through your list? Did you do that? No amount of email optimization is going to save you if you don't sit down and make those calls. And I think that's the thing. It's like we reach for these sort of complex widgets with all the bells and the whistles to make our lives easier. And it actually makes our lives a hell of a lot more complicated. And then we don't ever end up achieving the goal that we want to achieve, because we just can't make that decision to put one foot in front of the other. And again, so doing the simple thing is often doing a thing, like doing something, as opposed to, again, complexity adds pre-steps before you take the step.
Yeah. But I think it also gives us a sense. There's something about when you're uncomfortable, sitting in the space of the discomfort sort of amplifies the uncomfy feelings. So complexity entails a lot of work, entails a lot of things. And so there's this sense, I think, that, well, I was productive, I did all these things, and it didn't work. However, as you said, but what's the simple thing that would actually work? Doing the call time. It's not easy. It's not fun, but it actually is the most effective thing. So some of this, looking at simplicity is being willing to ask ourselves the uncomfortable questions of, where am I confusing productivity, busyness, complexity as an excuse to not have time to do the thing that I actually need to do?
You say this all the time, and it is so spot on that, like, people use that as a stand-in for activity.
I mean, to be clear, incredible. I do too. Like, I say
all
it
of us do. It's a human tendency.
I say it because I notice it in myself. I'm like, I just did a bunch of stuff, and I feel I actually genuinely did things. Like, it is actually a truth to say I did these things. They actually didn't. The thing that really needed to get done, or the thing that was actually the more important thing to do, I avoided it through all of these other activities. I think there's like I can't remember. It's basically like a portmanteau of like procrastination, but it's productive. And I can't remember what the word is, but essentially like, I love that, where I'm like, I cleaned the whole house because I was avoiding doing the thing that I want to do. And oops, now I don't have time to do the thing I needed to do. Or, maybe I just need to let something breathe, but that's uncomfortable. So I'm going to rush to start a new project, or I'm going to do something to kind of alleviate the discomfort that actually ends up complicating things and causing more consternation in my life than if I just was willing to sit in the discomfort of having to wait for something to come to pass, or having to let something, whatever that thing is that needs to do that I don't want to do, to let that happen before I rush off to something else.
I mean, and then I'll say that I am also one of the worst offenders in this space, is that we've been having this conversation a lot, starting a new business, new venture, and trying to figure out how to get the word out there. And I often find myself asking myself, like, well, here are all these sophisticated marketing strategies. We're going to do social media and others, and that's all important. And we do that for sure.
Podcast
this is more, there we go. So we started a podcast before doing that.
Before doing these things.
Well, I mean, the podcast is now, like, actually doing this though is a product of finally being like, let's keep it simple. We don't need the professional studio set up right now. We just need to record an episode. And as it turns out, that works pretty well, as opposed to hemming and hawing over the camera that kept overheating.
Good and done is better than perfect, and someday
100%. We had this camera that kept overheating, that we kept trying to, and it just like, we need to get a new, no, it's
we need to get a battery, like a dummy battery that hooks up into the thing. And there was all these solutions. It was like, hey, what if we just record, like spiffed up the background with some stuff we already had, so it didn't look like a total disaster, put on the headphones, grab the mic, and just let it rip, and realize that it can evolve as it moves forward, versus needing to be perfect and complicated and what have you.
Yeah, I mean, that really did prevent us though prevented me from moving forward, because again, you're just like going through the cycle of like, I have to fix this camera issue before we can.
And then we got to do this, and then we have to do that.
Just sit down and record the damn episode, and that's what we did. So that's what you're getting
and
now.
Here we are.
Who knows? Maybe at some point we'll add some of that stuff in as it becomes more appropriate and the overall friction reduces. But I mean, using it as an excuse not to record something is kind of silly. And back to the other thing too, it's like thinking about, well, did you just send an email to everyone that you know and tell them about the thing that you're doing? And it's like, no, I didn't. So that's simple, maybe uncomfortable, maybe not the easiest thing to do. I think there are a lot of us out there who don't like to talk about ourselves very much. But again, the simple thing to do would be to just send the email and tell people what you're doing for your new venture. So I don't know, that's simplicity for you though. I think it really does come in handy. And again, it helps get through that decision paralysis, because again, when you're adding complexity to a solution to already complex problems, I think it just, again, creates a ton of friction. And
you lose sight of the thing that you're actually trying to do. I mean, that's the challenge with complexity, is it does then introduce new variables. If you're throwing a lot of data at something, if you're throwing a lot of solutions at something, versus saying, is there a simpler, cleaner way to do it? It's unavoidable that you're going to create new tangents, new thoughts, new things that people, rational humans, will then say, well, wait a minute, maybe it's not the right time to make a decision. Maybe it's not the right time to do this, because look at all of these things that we need to examine first. So it ends up being a massive barrier. And especially if you are in a crisis situation, if you're in a situation where speed is important, this becomes an even more critical step of really just taking a moment and saying, are we overcomplicating this? What do we know now that we can communicate, we can decide, we can talk about, and then we can come back to these pieces later. But what is, former Senator Carper would always, for those who ever heard him speak, he would say so often, make sure you keep the main thing the main thing. Mm-hmm. And I think that really, in a lot of ways, is what simplicity consistently brings us back to, is like, what is the main thing? And are our actions serving that or something else?
Exactly. Sometimes you really are just playing checkers. It doesn't need to be chess. Just checkers. Gets the job done.
Awesome.
With that, we'll leave you with that this week. So thank you for indulging us in another episode, and we hope you'll be back next week for our guest, unless something else happens.
And then it's us again.
Then you're stuck with us again. But we are in the process of lining up other guests as well that will join us to talk about some of these topics and let us into their process for, again, navigating life, navigating its challenges, new perspectives on again, life, work, resilience. So we are very much looking forward to that. And if you are enjoying what you're hearing and are here for the chaos, please leave us a review on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever else you get your podcast. If you're on Substack, please help us spread the word and share and subscribe. And we are so grateful, again, to all of you who are listening and are joining us week to week. We'll be back next week and just doing it, letting it rip, like we always do. So remember, keep it simple out there and go play checkers.
Yeah. Have a great week ahead, everybody. Thank you.
Bye.